The rain fell in slow, heavy sheets, drumming against the marble headstones of Crestwood Cemetery. Each drop a mournful note in the quiet symphony of grief. The sky hung low, a bruised gray canopy that seemed to press down on the rows of graves, where wilted flowers clung desperately to their stems. Their colors faded but defiant. Eleanor Prescott, a billionaire heiress whose name was synonymous with power in boardrooms and elegance at charity galas, stepped out of her sleek black Bentley, her polished heels sinking slightly into the sodden earth. A black umbrella shielded her silver hair, meticulously styled despite the weather, but her face, etched with lines of loss and resolve, remained exposed to the elements. She clutched a single white rose, its petals trembling in her grip, betraying the composure she'd spent decades perfecting. Her breath misted in the cold air as she walked the familiar path to her son's grave, each step heavier than the last, the weight of 3 years without impressing against her chest. As she approached the headstone, David Prescott, 1990 to 2022, beloved son, she felt a familiar ache, sharp and unrelenting, like a blade lodged in her heart. But then she froze, her breath catching in her throat. A woman knelt at the grave, her shoulders shaking with quiet, wrenching sobs. She was black, dressed in a simple diner uniform, the kind with a faded name tag pinned crookedly to the chest. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to frame her tear-streaked face. Beside her, a small boy, no older than 5, clung to her side, his tiny hand gripping a toy car, its red paint chipped from use. The sight was jarring, an intrusion in this sacred space. Eleanor's pulse quickened, a mix of confusion and indignation rising in her chest. Who was this woman, and why was she crying at her son's grave? The boy looked up, his wide, dark eyes meeting Eleanor's with an intensity that sent a jolt through her. There was something achingly familiar in his gaze, something that stirred a memory she couldn't place. She stepped closer, her voice sharp but unsteady, cutting to the patter of rain. "Excuse me," she said, her tone clipped, authoritative, the voice of a woman used to being obeyed. "Who are you and why are you here?" The woman startled, her hand flying to her face to wipe away tears, her movements quick but deliberate, as if she'd been caught in a private moment. She stood, positioning herself protectively in front of the boy, her face a complex mix of fear and defiance. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she stammered, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't mean to intrude. I had to come." Her words were careful, but there was a quiet strength in them, a resolve that made Eleanor pause. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the rose. "This is my son's grave," she said, her voice colder now, edged with suspicion. "You have no business here." The woman's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She clutched the boy tighter, her fingers curling around his small shoulder. The rain continued to fall, soaking her uniform, but she didn't flinch. And then, in a whisper that carried the weight of 1,000 secrets, she said, "I'm here because he was my husband." Eleanor's umbrella slipped from her hand, hitting the ground with a soft, wet thud. The rain soaked her tailored coat, but she didn't notice. Her son, her David, married? To this woman, a stranger in a waitress's uniform? Impossible. Her mind reeled, rejecting the idea as absurd, a cruel trick. And yet, the boy's eyes, they were David's eyes, the same deep brown, the same quiet intensity that had defined her son even as a child. Her heart pounded, a storm of emotions, grief, anger, disbelief, swirling within her. What secret had David kept from her? And why was this woman, an outsider from a world so far removed from the Prescott legacy, claiming a piece of her family? The cemetery seemed to shrink around them, the rain a curtain that isolated this moment from the rest of the world. Eleanor's gaze flicked between the woman and the boy, searching for answers in their faces. The woman's tears were real, her grief as raw as Eleanor's own, but that only deepened her suspicion. Was this a calculated performance? A con artist exploiting a grieving mother's pain? Or was there truth in those trembling words, a truth that would unravel everything Eleanor thought she knew about her son? She took a step closer, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Explain yourself," she demanded, her eyes boring into the woman's. "Now." The woman straightened, her fear giving way to something fiercer. "My name is Maya Jackson," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "And this is Caleb, David's son. Our son." Eleanor's world tilted, the ground unsteady beneath her. A son? A grandson? The words echoed in her mind, each one a hammer against the walls of her carefully constructed reality. She wanted to scream, to demand proof, to dismiss this as a lie. But Caleb's face, his dimpled smile, the curl of his hair, mirrored the childhood photos of David that still lined her mantle. She couldn't look away. The rain fell harder now, blurring the edges of the moment, but one question burned brighter than the rest. What had David hidden from her, and why? Eleanor Prescott was a titan of industry, a woman who clawed her way from her father's modest construction firm to build a real estate empire that spanned continents. At 65, she was a picture of polished perfection. Tailored suits, diamond earrings, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her life was a carefully curated display of wealth and control, her name a currency in itself. But beneath the surface, beneath the boardroom victories and gala smiles, she carried a wound that never healed. Her only son, David, had died in a car accident 3 years ago at 32, leaving her with nothing but memories and a void she could neither fill nor escape. She'd thrown herself into her work, into preserving the Prescott legacy, but every night, alone in her sprawling mansion, she felt the weight of his absence. Maya Jackson, the woman at the grave, was her opposite in every way. At 29, she was a waitress at a small diner on the edge of town, her hands calloused from long shifts, Roscoe's, her eyes tired but sharp with a quiet strength that belied her worn-out sneakers and faded uniform. She spoke softly, but her words carried conviction, as if she'd been preparing for this confrontation her entire life. Caleb, the boy she claimed was her son with David, was a living contradiction to Eleanor's reality. His curly hair, his dimpled smile, his curious eyes, they were David's, unmistakably so, and yet Eleanor couldn't accept it. Not yet. Maya's grief was raw, her tears genuine, but Eleanor's first instinct was suspicion. Maya was an outsider, someone from a world of greasy spoons and unpaid bills, far removed from the Prescott's penthouses and private jets. Was she a gold digger, weaving a story to claim a piece of the Prescott fortune? Or was there truth in her trembling voice, in the way she held Caleb close, as if he were her only anchor? Eleanor's mind raced as she studied Maya, searching for cracks in her story. The woman's composure, her refusal to shrink under Eleanor's scrutiny, hinted at a deeper strength, a resilience forged in hardship. "I loved him," Maya said, her voice steady now, her eyes meeting Eleanor's without flinching. "And he loved me. He wanted to tell you, but he was afraid you wouldn't understand." The word stung, sharp and precise, cutting into Eleanor's carefully guarded heart. Understand? She'd raised David to be honest, to share his life with her. They'd been close, or so she thought. Late-night talks, shared dreams of future, her guiding him as the heir to her empire. How could he have hidden a wife? A child? The accusation felt like a betrayal, but Caleb's presence complicated everything. His eyes, so like David's, held her captive, stirring a hope she wasn't ready to embrace. "I need more than your word," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "If you're telling the truth, prove it." Maya nodded, her expression resolute. "I will," she said softly, "for Caleb's sake." The confrontation at the cemetery lingered, like a ghost, haunting Eleanor's every thought. She invited, no, demanded, that Maya meet her at the Prescott estate, a sprawling mansion perched on a hill overlooking the city, its windows gleaming like eyes watching the world below. The meeting was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations, the weight of wealth and power palpable in the room. Eleanor's lawyer, Richard Holt, sat at her side, a silver-haired man with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue, his notepad ready to dissect Maya's story like a surgeon's scalpel. His presence was a reminder of the stakes. Billions in assets, a legacy built over generations, and a mother's grief now tangled with suspicion. Maya arrived with Caleb, her diner uniform replaced by a simple blue dress, its hem slightly frayed, but clean. Her hands fidgeted. but her chin was high, her posture defined despite the opulence surrounding her. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a world so unlike the cramped apartment she called home. Caleb clung to a stuffed bear, its fur worn from years of love, his eyes darting around the room, wide with wonder and a hint of fear. The contrast was stark. Maya and Caleb, small and vulnerable in this cathedral wealth, yet unshaken in their purpose. "Let's be clear," Richard began, his tone cold, his words precise. "You claim you were married to David Prescott, yet there's no record of a marriage certificate, no mention of you in his will, no evidence you ever existed in his life. Why should we believe you?" His pen hovered over the notepad, ready to trap her in a lie. Maya's eyes flashed with quiet anger, a spark of defiance that caught Eleanor off guard. "Because I have proof," she said, pulling a worn envelope from her bag. Inside were letters, handwritten by David, addressed to Maya in his familiar, looping scrawl. Love letters, filled with promises of a future together, mentions of Caleb's first steps, his first words, and apologies for keeping their marriage a secret. "He said he'd tell you when the time was right," Maya said, her voice soft but unyielding. But then the accident happened. Eleanor's hands shook as she read the letters, each word a dagger to her heart. David's handwriting was unmistakable, his voice vivid in the phrases. "Maya, you're my home. Caleb's smile is my reason to keep going." The tenderness was David's, the man she'd raised, but the life he described was foreign, a secret kept from her. Doubt gnawed at her, a persistent whisper. "These could be forged," she said, her voice wavering, clinging to skepticism like a lifeline. "You could have written them yourself." Maya didn't flinch, her gaze steady. "Then test them. Check the dates. The paper. The ink. I'm not here for your money, Mrs. Prescott. I'm here because Caleb deserves to know his father's family." Her words were a challenge, not a plea, and Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. Richard leaned forward, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Convenient timing, don't you think? Showing up now, years after David's death, when the Prescott estate is worth billions." His voice dripped with insinuation, each syllable meant to wound. Caleb, silent until now, tugged at Maya's sleeve, his small voice cutting through the tension like a bell. "Mommy, why are they mad?" His words were innocent, his eyes wide with confusion, and Eleanor's heart stuttered. She saw David in him, the same curious tilted head, the same earnest gaze that had once looked to her for answers. The room seemed to pause, the weight of his question hanging in the air. The tension escalated as Richard pressed Maya with relentless questions. Where did she meet David? Why was there no public record of their marriage? Maya answered calmly, her story unwavering. David had been a regular at her diner, slipping in late at night after board meetings, their conversations growing from small talk to love over months of quiet moments. Their marriage was a small courthouse ceremony, kept secret to avoid Eleanor's disapproval, a decision David had agonized over. "He wanted to tell you," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "He loved you, but he was afraid you'd see me as less than." Eleanor's skepticism grew, a fortress against the truth. She couldn't reconcile her son, the heir to her empire, with this life Maya described, a life of diner shifts and modest dreams. It was too far from the world she'd built, the legacy she'd groomed him for. Yet every time Caleb spoke or smiled, her resolve cracked, tiny fissures spreading through her certainty. She ordered a private investigator to dig into Maya's past, expecting to uncover a scam, a flaw in her story. Instead, the investigator returned with photos. David and Maya at a park, laughing as they pushed a newborn Caleb on a swing. A grainy video of David teaching Caleb to ride a tricycle, his voice warm and patient. The evidence was mounting. Each piece of brick in a wall Eleanor wasn't ready to climb. Alone in her study that night, Eleanor stared at a photo of David, his smile frozen in time. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "What were you afraid of?" The question lingered unanswered as the rain continued to fall outside, a mirror to the storm within her. The investigation deepened and small revelations began to shift the narrative, each one a pebble in the tide of Eleanor's doubt. The investigator uncovered a hidden bank account in David's name, with regular transfers to an account in Maya's name. Small amounts, enough to cover rent and groceries, but nothing extravagant. It wasn't the act of a con artist. It was the act of a man protecting his family, a man who loved quietly but fiercely. Eleanor's breath caught as she read the report, the numbers stark and undeniable. Then came the marriage certificate, tucked away in the records of the small-town courthouse, dated 2 years before David's death. Richard, his smugness fading, confirmed its authenticity, his voice tight with reluctant admission. "It checks out," he said, the words heavy in the quiet of the study. They were legally married. The document was simple, its ink faded but real, a testament to a love Eleanor hadn't known. Her world tilted, the foundations of her reality trembling. She demanded to see Maya again, this time alone, in the quiet of her study, where the walls were lined with photos of David. David as a boy, David at his college graduation, David at her side in boardrooms. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Eleanor asked, her voice raw, almost pleading. "Why wait until now?" Maya's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "I was scared," she said. "David said you'd never accept me, someone like me. I didn't want Caleb to grow up feeling unwanted, like he didn't belong in your world. But when I heard you were selling the estate..." She paused, her breath hitching. "I couldn't let his memory be erased." Eleanor's breath caught. Selling the estate? She hadn't announced that publicly. Not yet. The decision was still a draft, a plan discussed only in private board meetings. How did Maya know? The question hung in the air, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Then Maya revealed another truth. A friend at David's company, a loyal colleague, had been forwarding his old emails to her, messages filled with plans for the future, for Caleb, for the empire. Maya knew more about the Prescott legacy than Eleanor had realized. Her knowledge of quiet power that shifted the balance between them. The turning point came a formal meeting with Eleanor's board directors, a gathering of tailored suits and sharp minds in a boardroom that gleamed with polished wood and city views. Eleanor had called it to discuss the estate's future, her plan to sell a portion of the company's assets a closely guarded secret. But Maya arrived uninvited, Caleb at her side, his small hand clutching hers. The boardroom fell silent as she walked in, her presence an anomaly in their world of wealth and privilege. Heads turned, whispers stifled, as Maya stood tall, her simple dress a stark contrast to the room's opulence. "Mrs. Prescott," Maya began, her voice steady but firm, carrying the weight of her purpose. "I'm not here to fight for money or power. I'm here for Caleb. David left something for him. Something you need to know about." She produced a document, notarized and signed by David, its pages crisp despite their age. It was a trust fund, established in Caleb's name, with a clause that stunned Eleanor. David had named Maya as the executor of a significant portion of his shares in the Prescott empire. Not only was Maya his wife, but she held a stake in the company, a stake Eleanor had unknowingly been trying to sell. The boardroom erupted in murmurs, a ripple of shock spreading through the room. Richard's face paled, his notepad forgotten on the table. Eleanor stared at the document, her hands trembling, the words blurring before her eyes. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It is," Maya said, her tone unwavering. "David wanted Caleb to have a future, but he also wanted me to protect his legacy. He trusted me." Her words were a quiet thunder, resonating in the silence that followed. Eleanor's eyes locked on Caleb, who sat quietly, drawing on a notepad, oblivious to the tension that filled the room. She saw David in every line of his face, the curve of his jaw, the spark in his eyes. The truth crashed over her like a wave, relentless and undeniable. Her son had built a life she didn't know, a family she hadn't accepted, a legacy she'd almost destroyed. The boardroom seemed to shrink, the air heavy with the weight of her realization. Eleanor stood, her voice commanding but soft, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Enough," she said, silencing the board with a single word. She turned to Maya, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was wrong. About you. About David. About everything." Her voice cracked, but she held her ground, her presence as formidable as ever. She walked to Caleb, kneeling to his level, her tailored skirt brushing the floor. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice gentle, a tone she hadn't used in years. "Caleb." he said shyly, holding up his drawing. A crude sketch of three stick figures holding hands, a family bound by love. The simplicity of it broke something in Eleanor, a wall she'd built around her heart. "That's beautiful," she whispered, her throat tight with emotion. She looked at Maya, her gaze steady now. "You're his mother, and my son loved you. That's enough for me." She turned to the board, her voice rising with authority. "The sale is off. The trust fund stands. And Maya Jackson will have a seat at this table, as David intended." Her words were final, a decree that brooked no argument. Richard sputtered, his objections feeble against her resolve, but Eleanor's glare silenced him. The power had shifted, not through anger or force, but through the quiet strength of truth. Maya, once an outsider, now held a place in the Prescott legacy, her presence a testament to David's love. The board members nodded, some reluctantly, others with quiet respect, their skepticism no match for the weight of the moment. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change, a new chapter in a story Eleanor hadn't expected to write. She welcomed Maya and Caleb into her life, not as charity cases, but as family, their presence filling the mansion with warmth it had lacked for years. She set up a college fund for Caleb, insisting he have every opportunity David would have wanted: music lessons, private tutors, a future as bright as his father's dreams. Maya, hesitant at first, accepted a role in the company, her sharp instincts and quiet wisdom guiding decisions David would have approved. Her perspective, forged in a world of struggle, brought a balance the board hadn't known it needed. Richard, humiliated by his assumptions, resigned quietly, his departure a footnote in the larger story. The board, once skeptical, began to see Maya's value, her resilience, her love for David's vision, her ability to navigate their world without losing her own. Eleanor, for the first time in years, felt a flicker of hope, a spark of light in the darkness of her grief. Caleb's laughter filled the mansion, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed, its echo chasing away the silence that had haunted her. One evening, Eleanor and Maya sat together at David's grave, the air soft with the scent of fresh grass. Caleb played nearby, chasing fireflies as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Crestwood Cemetery. "I wish I'd known you sooner," Eleanor said softly, her voice thick with regret. "I wish I'd been better." Maya smiled, her eyes warm, reflecting the fading light. "You're here now," she said. "That's what matters." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of forgiveness, a bridge between their worlds. The rain had stopped, and the sun broke through the clouds, its light a promise of new beginnings. Eleanor watched Caleb, his laughter a melody in the stillness, his joy a reminder of what she'd almost lost. She'd spent her life building an empire, amassing wealth and power, but in her pursuit of legacy, she'd nearly missed what mattered most: family. Maya's courage had torn down the walls Eleanor had built, walls of wealth, of pride, of fear, not with anger, but with truth, a truth that had set them both free. This wasn't just about one woman's grief or one child's future. It was about the barriers we erect, the divisions between rich and poor, between pride and love. Maya's strength, her quiet defiance, had shattered those barriers, revealing a truth Eleanor hadn't seen. That family is not defined by blood or wealth, but by the bonds we choose to honor. In that truth, Eleanor found redemption, a chance to rebuild what she'd nearly lost. Sometimes, the greatest legacy isn't in the billions we leave behind, but in the lives we touch, the mistakes we own, and the family we choose to embrace. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human.